Good afternoon, everyone. So we'll continue our discussion on the optimization methods. Today's session, which is a bit long one, 2 hours at a stretch, would be difficult for anyone, especially on online. So we'll have some short break in between. Today we are going to discuss the classical methods. Means all of us have learned even in the higher secondary that uh, first differential of a function being 0, it indicates that it's either maxima or minima. So that is the beginning point from which we'll start. And what functions we were dealing there were single variable functions. We'll understand how do we deal with multivariable functions. So if you are dealing with surfaces or multidimensional objects or functions, then how do you find maxima or minima of that? So that is one of the important discussion we will have today. And we will discuss about uh, the we discussed that there are unconstrained problems. So initially we will have focus our discussion on unconstrained problems. So there are no constraints, and later on we will see if there are equality constraints. Then how do we solve these problems using classical or calculus based method? Here classical method means calculus based methods. And later on in the next session, we will look into how to deal with optimization problems which are having inequality constraints. So that is the thing which the way we will move ahead from this point onward. So before we do that, we had some small tail end of the graphical method problem left from previous class. So we'll complete that. To recap the problem, what we're discussing is as follows. So the problem there was we solved this problem using graphical methods. So you had two machine parts to be manufactured, and each machine part, part number one gives you profit of 50 rupees per unit. Second part gives you 100 rupees per unit. And part one requires first lathe operation, then milling operation, and then grinding operation. And the minutes required for them are given. And similarly, part two, the minutes required for each of the machine are given. And the capacity of machine per week is given. And our objective is to produce certain number of part 1 and certain number of part 2 so that we maximize the profit. So the objective function we defined in terms of this uh, objective function in terms of profit. So the screen what we had last time is here. So we defined the objective function as shown here in terms of x1 and x2, which are the quantities to be manufactured for each of the machining part, and then the constraints on the lathe. That is, the lathe can work per week only so many minutes, milling can work for so many minutes, and grinding can work for so many minutes. So these are the constraints G1, G2, and G3. In graphical method, we then translated this constraints onto the two-dimensional plane. So since this is a problem with only two variables, so this graphical method is possible for two-dimensional problems. So on axis 1, we have first variable, that is x1, and other axis we are having x2. And the equations of this constraint line we put on this method, and we get the feasible region. So the region which is hatched here is the feasible region. And without proof, I told you that in case of the problems of this type or the linear programming type, the vertices of the feasible region, the optima always lies on the vertices of this minimum region. So we calculated the value at the vertices, and the one which is shown here, which is having coordinates as shown here, is taken as is having the maximum value of profit, which corresponds to 21,875. Of course, it has got somebody pointed out last time that it is having non-integer solution. So that is correct. So this problem actually means has to be solved using integer programming problem. But for the sake of understanding or illustrating the graphical method, this should suffice. Okay, so the real thing is part 1 needs 187 number of parts. So this profit would be not exactly this much. It will be less than that. Okay, the idea is to understand this method, and this problem illustrates that. Another thing which I just want to mention here is this graphical method allows you to observe the variation of your objective function. So your objective function is given here. So the objective function can be written as 50x1 plus 100x2 equal to some constant k. So it is the equation of a straight line, and this k is nothing but your profit. So if you draw the objective function passing through the point, which is our optima point, you will find that for this particular point, the equation of line will be as follows, and here k will be equal to 21,875. If you pass through any other point, so for example, if I am passing through the point which is passing through this point, so the objective function value at this point is 20,000. So in this sense, you can observe the various objective function. The nature of variation objective function can be observed from this particular scenario. And the maxima can be found out accordingly. So in this case, your objective function is a linear function. So all lines are parallel. If it is a non-linear function, then you will get a set of curves which will allow us to visualize how your objective function is varying and where the optima could be lying. So this particular method allows you to have some observation and graphically determine or graphically estimate where would the minima lie. Another insight from this particular method is, or rather any optimization problem, is that not all optimization problems have got unique solutions such as or single solution, as we can see here. If this objective function happens to be parallel to any of the constraint lines, so in that case you will find that the objective line and the constraint line, instead of intersecting, they will overlap each other. So instead of having a unique solution, you will get a set of infinite solutions. I will just illustrate that. So instead of considering that part 1 is giving 50 rupees per unit profit, if I consider it as 40 rupees per unit as so if I consider my objective function, instead of 50x, if I consider it as 40x1 plus 100x2 equal to k1. So that is a new objective function, for example. So in that case, you will find that this particular line is exactly parallel to the constraint G2. So this is 4x1 plus 10x2 equal to 2000. And this is 40 times x1 plus 100 times x2 is k1. So if you try to optimize this function, the variation of this function would be as follows. So these functions would have different slope, which is parallel to G2 function. And the optima will come where this line coincides with the G2 line. So this is the region where the optima will lie. And within the constraints, any point which is lying between these 2 points, so that would be your optima. So you have infinite solutions in this particular case. So the point I wanted to make here is that not all optimization problems will have a single optimal point. It can have multiple optimal solutions, and in cases such as this, you can have infinite solutions as well. So any point in between in this line segment is the optimum. So everywhere the value is as defined by this particular function. Yeah, so that ends our discussion on the graphical method. So this method is useful for two-dimensional problems and to visualize the problem as well as the objective function in a natural manner. Okay, now let's move ahead with our main topic for today, that is the classical methods or calculus-based methods. So let's begin with something which we already know about, and before that some definitions. So I'm just drawing a function of two variables. So my variable is x, and my objective function is function of that x. So this is known as univariate optimization problems, or single variable optimization problems. So I will consider in this case the function variation as shown here. So I'm just considering a function which is just any arbitrary function. I'm just drawing it here. So this particular function is having multiple number of maxima and minima. So you get, if you count the maxima, there are 1, 2, and 3 maxima are there. And if you count minima in the region, so I'm just examining the region which is in the first quadrant. So in the first quadrant, the minima is, so this is maxima. So this is A1, A2, and A3 are maxima, and B1, B2, these are the minima. So all the out of all the maxima, there will be one which is highest. So that is known as the global maxima. So just a nomenclature I am making it clear. And the other ones are known as local maxima. So usually we are interested in global maxima, what is the amongst the various local maxima which is having highest. And similarly, you have global minima, and you are having the local minima. There can be some points which at each of these points you find that slope of the line is 0. So that is f dash x is 0 at each of the point. But that does not necessarily mean that wherever f dash x is 0, your point has to be necessarily maxima or minima. There could be some points. So for example, a point where the slope is changing from negative slope to positive slope. So somewhere it is having 0 slope. So there is one point here. So this point is neither maxima nor minima, but the slope is 0 at this point as well. So these points are known as inflection points. Okay, so that is just some terminology which I wanted to introduce at the beginning. Now, in order to, for such univariate optimization problems, in order to decide the maxima or minima or the optimum point, we already know what is the condition. So the condition what we call as f dash s equal to 0. So that is known as necessary condition. So any optimization problem, you have to satisfy one necessary condition. And for univariate problem, the condition is f dash of, I'm just writing here, x star equal to 0. So in this case, if you satisfy this condition, which means that this x star, this could be either maxima or minima, or it could be inflection point. So it could be one of the three. So in order to determine whether it's maxima or minima, you have to satisfy second condition, which is known as sufficiency condition. So you might have come across that in your mathematics or in your general reading. So anybody knows how do we determine whether it's maxima or minima?
So the values that we get from f dash of x, we plug those values in the original equation.
Okay, that is the direct way, but
Yeah.
calculus based way.
So if double dash x, if it is positive, then we have a minima, and if it is negative, we have a maximum.
So if it is positive, then it is,
Minima, I think.
yeah, that's right. You are right. And if it is negative, then it is maxima. So that's right. But what happens if f double dash x also happens to be 0?
Is it the point of inflection?
No, it need not be. So it still remains undecided. Anybody knows what to do if f double dash x is also 0? Okay. So the sufficiency condition in its totality is as follows. So the sufficiency condition stands as follows. So let f dash x star x star equal to 0. So that means you keep on finding first non-zero derivative. So up to n minus 1, you find all the earlier derivatives are 0. And then you find that f nth derivative at that particular point is not equal to 0. So all earlier derivatives are 0 and nth derivative is non-zero. Then depending on whether n is odd or even, you have different inferences. So if n is even, so for example, second derivative, and nth derivative is greater than 0, then it indicates minimum. So for example, this is the condition what you stated is a special case of this. So where the second derivative, so n is even, and if it is positive, then it is minima. And in this case, if fn x star is less than 0, then it is equal to maxima. And if n is odd, then f dash x star, sorry, if n is odd, so in that case, the function fx star is the inflection point. So if you find till second derivative everything is 0 and third derivative is non-zero, then that is an inflection point. Or up to fourth derivative everything is 0 and fifth derivative is non-zero, then it is an inflection point. However, if it is an even derivative, then you have you can infer whether it's maxima or minima. Now this particular thing can be just explained in terms of the Taylor series expansion of this particular function. So let's understand how this particular condition has come. So I'll just rub off some of the thing from here. Let me go to next page. So if we take the Taylor series expansion of a function, the x plus h can be defined in terms of f of x plus h times f dash of x plus h square by 2 f double dash x plus h cube by 3 f triple dash x plus so on. So in general, you'll have h to power n divided by n factorial into f nth derivative, where h is any small variation from the point. So if you are having this function and this is something which we are investigating at the point x, so this is my x at this point, or x star. So any h could be positive or negative. So you could have h either positive value or negative value. So in the local proximity of this point, you will get the value of this function as given by this Taylor series expansion. Now, what this particular thing means, whenever you are talking about, so this n is the power of your h. So whenever the power, that is n, is even, so you are getting first non-zero term, what we discussed in the previous slide, is that n is even and the function that derivative value is non-zero. So for example, if second derivative is non-zero and the first derivative is 0, that means this term is 0 and this term is non-zero. So this term is non-zero. So whether h is positive or negative, the h square term will always be positive. So this will be always positive. And if f double dash x is positive, it means that whether you go to the right of the point or to the left of this point. So this is the value f of x plus h. So whether you are going to the right or to the left, you will always find that your function is in the proximity, the function will be higher than your local point. So which means that your x star is minima. I'll repeat once again that if your n value, that is the derivative term, is even, so in that case, and all our earlier derivatives are 0. So in this case, your function value, irrespective of whether h is positive or negative, that is you are moving to the right of your point or left of your point, if the second derivative is positive, then your function value is always going to rise. So that means the original point around which you are searching or around which you are investigating, that point has to be minima, because anywhere you go right or left of that point, the function value always rises. Similar thing, you will find that whenever n, so as a generality, if all the earlier terms are 0 and some nth term happens to be non-zero, in the case h is even, you will always get this particular term will always be positive. And in that case, if your nth derivative is positive, then that indicates it's a minima. Now let's see the other part when n is odd. So if n is odd, then in that case, h to power n can be positive or negative based on whether the h is positive or negative. So as a result of which, your function could increase or it could decrease on either side of the function. So in that case, it is indeterminate, means you cannot say that whether it's maxima or minima, and it happens to be a point of inflection because slope there is 0, first derivative is 0, but the function may rise, it may remain flat for a long time, or it may rise on one side, it may drop on other side, or it could be otherwise. So in such case, you are uncertain about the conclusion. So this particular discussion what we had, will have means we'll apply the same logic for functions of higher order functions. So here we are discussing the first order functions, which are very easy to visualize, and we can understand here that how this the rule what we just now gave, that is the necessary and sufficiency condition for optimization, how it works can be understood by taking this Taylor series expansion. So any question at this point? Is it clear what I said?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So let's take one small example just to break the monotony and just to understand how this sufficiency condition works. So you have to find maxima or minima for f of x equal to, so this could be any objective function. So your problem happens to be a case where your function is minus 12 into x to power 5 minus 45 x to power 4 plus 40 x cube plus 5. So this is the function that we are talking about. So let's apply the conditions, the necessary condition and sufficiency condition, and find out what answer we get. So first we will apply the necessary condition. So in order to have a point at maxima or minima, the first derivative must be equal to 0. So by differentiating this function, we'll get 60 x to power 4 minus 180 x cube plus 120 x square equal to 0. So we will have 60x square. So if you factorize this particular polynomial, you will get the answer as follows. So we get 3 points at which the function happens to be 0. So f dash x is 0 at x equal to 0, 1 and 2. So there are 3 x values, and each of this point we have to check for the sufficiency conditions. We have to check at each of the point whether the second derivative is 0, it's positive or negative. So based on that we can conclude something. Okay, so let's take the first point. So next is sufficiency condition. So we are at each point we'll consider the second derivative. So if double dash x will be 60 in the bracket 4x cube minus 9x square plus 4x. Therefore at x equal to 1, so that is one of the points. So at x equal to 1, f double dash x, if we calculate, it is minus 60. So at x equal to 1, the first derivative is 0 and second derivative is negative. So what does it mean? It's x equal to 1 is maxima, minima or inflection point. If the second derivative is negative,
Maxima.
yeah, so that means that x equal to 1 is maxima. Or to be more accurate, it is a local maxima. Because at present we don't know what is a global maxima or minima. So we will say that it is local maxima. So at x equal to 2, if we calculate f double dash x, it will come out to be 240. So it indicates what? Obviously, if the negative is maxima, then positive is minima. So this is a minima. In general, the points what we obtain here, they will be local maxima or minima. But in this particular case, unless we evaluate the third point, we will not know which is global. So the third point is at x equal to 0. So at x equal to 0, f double dash x also happens to be 0. So which means that this particular point x equal to 0 is an inflection point, that it is neither maxima or minima. So it means at this point we know that it is neither maxima or minima, so we have to evaluate further by calculating the next derivative and then decide. But as we'll see, I just plotted this particular function and checked, and it happens to be an inflection point, so it is neither maxima or minima. But theoretically we should calculate the further derivatives and evaluate it. Okay, so I just want to show how this function varies. Okay, so the function what we are talking about is this one. So I just wrote one small Python script in order to check this particular function. So I hope some of you are, means all of you are practicing to some extent Python programming. I did not review that, but this week's tutorial we will have some introduction to Python. So nevertheless, this particular function what we are discussing here, I just plotted it, the function and its derivative. So I calculated the function and this is its derivative numerically calculated. So the function what we see in red is the actual function. So the red color thing is the actual function and the blue color thing is its derivative. So the derivative function becomes 0 at 3 points. So it becomes 0 at x equal to 0. So that is what first solution we got. So at x equal to 0, you will see here that this to the left of 0, the function is dropping, and to the right of this 0, the function is rising. The red color line is the function line. So this is a point of inflection. Second one is at x equal to 1. Again, the blue color line, that is the derivative is 0. So this is a 0 axis. So this is 0, and at this point at x equal to 1, the function is maximum, and at x equal to 2, again your derivative is 0 and the function happens to be negative there. A function happens to be minimum there. So that just confirms our findings that we got here. So at the points what we discussed just now. Okay, I cannot move this window, I think. Okay, so let's forget it. Okay, so we get just graphical understanding of the problem. So programming allows you to do some quick checks in terms of checking the variations. So whether our answers are correct or just get more insight. The programming helps you to quickly generate a set of functions and check how the behavior of the function is, how the behavior of the derivatives is, and so on. Okay, so that is the introductory part. So this is the part which, except maybe the condition what we talked here, otherwise all of you are already aware of the basic necessary condition that first derivative has to be 0. The sufficiency condition is something which might not be in your curriculum, but that is what we have introduced. Now the same theme we will carry forward next to the function of multiple variables. So now we will transit from univariate functions to multivariate functions.
Sir,
Yeah, Prasad.
sir, for the double derivative term, you said for if it is 0, there is a step of procedures as you mentioned earlier, right?
Right.
Rather than when I used to study, I was set to test the points near the point where it is zero.
Right.
So if like the derivative continuously remains positive, negative, right? If it's a maxima. So around the point, if it's coming continuously negative, then it means a maxima. And if around that point, if it continuously comes out to be positive, it's minima.
You're talking about second derivative.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So like we can do such things also, right? Like rather than following a procedure.
Yeah, but this procedure allows you to automate this calculation. The one what you are talking, it requires human intervention. I did not get what you are saying is you calculate in the proximity. That is, you pick some points in the proximity of this point, and
Yes, sir. If for instance, if let's assume the point of zero is a point of maxima.
okay,
So around the point zero, the double derivative should be negative. Zero plus h and zero minus h.
okay.
And
But you
if
are
it's a
saying on.
minimum, yes, sir.
So what you are saying is, if you move ahead of this point and if you move backside of this point,
Yes,
both
sir.
cases the second derivative should be negative.
Yes, for maxima.
Okay,
And for minima, it would be positive.
okay,
And for point of inflection, it would vary like positive and negative.
okay, okay. Yeah,
I- So like we could even test it by just it's just only calculation, right? Like putting some test values in double derivatives. So like the process would be simpler, even if we try to automate. I think
okay.
so. I don't
I'll
know.
just note it down. So I got what you are saying. So you are saying that there is an alternative procedure which can be more easier to determine the maxima or minima than what we said here.
Yes,
So,
sir.
having seen this procedure from the textbook, I believe it is thoroughly evaluated, but
So,
let's check that. Yeah,
so in that procedure, basically what he's doing is taking nearby points, right?
right.
So if we let those nearby points tend to the point we're considering, then we just get this procedure. The
Yes, like
double, the double
for
derivative procedure you've outlined here.
No, what he is saying that instead of calculating the next derivative, you just check the sign of second derivative little ahead and little backward of the point.
Yes, sir, but if that little amount, if we let that tend to zero, then we
Okay.
just get these derivative conditions.
No, but by he's not calculating third derivative. He's just calculating sign
Yes, sir,
of
derivative.
second derivative.
but suppose the function is highly oscillatory, then if we just take like a small distance, we might end up skipping an entire maxima or minima.
No, but
If
that
we
is not his point. His point is you don't calculate the further derivatives at all. You just stop at second derivative and you can deduce from there itself. So I need to check that. Right, Prasad? That's what you are saying.
Yes, sir.
So
um,
in his understanding or in his what he's proposing is that you need not go beyond second derivative at all.
yes, sir, but if we don't do that, then we lose some amount of precision because we are using an approximation rather than limit.
Okay, that needs to be proved. So let me see that. Means you can yourself prove or disprove that, but let me
Okay, yes, sir.
also find it out.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so that's good point. So let me just anyway, it's getting recorded, so I will remember it. Okay, so let's move to the functions of multiple variables. So whenever you are having functions of multiple variables, the first derivative term that we talked about, it takes form of what is known as gradient vector. So we'll discuss the gradient vector, and the second derivative that we talked here, it takes form of a matrix, what is known as Hessian matrix. So just in multidimensional functions, you have two terms, but they are similar to f dash x and f double dash x. So these are the two things. So we'll maybe you have, I'm sure you must have done that in vector calculus, but here we are looking in a different fashion. Okay, so now we are talking about functions of multivariable. So although it may appear very mathematical or somewhat boring at afternoon session, but it is means this course is not totally mathematical based. So later on we'll see how this calculus based methods, they can be made more effective or efficient by using numerical methods. So that further part we'll see, but this is the fundamental which we have to understand, on based on which the non-calculus based methods are evolved. Okay, so now when we are talking about functions of multiple variables, there also the concept remains same. The necessary condition is that the first derivative has to be 0, and the sufficiency condition is that if the second equivalent of second derivative there is has to be positive, or some form of positivity. So we'll define that shortly. So let's first understand the gradient of a function, which is equivalent to the f dash x. So here we're talking about a function which is of x1, x2, and up to xn. So in short, I'll be representing this as f of x bar, where x bar is a vector in the, so x bar is a column vector which is having x1 up to xn. So this function, for example, could be x1 plus x2, x3 plus log of x4 and so on. So any function which is having a number of variables. So if for such functions, when you talk about the derivative, you have to talk about derivative because there are multiple variables. So the function will, the variation of function will be different for each of the variables. So if you vary x by a small amount, then function, the change in function will be different if you, by keeping the other variables constant. If you vary only x2 and keep other variables same, then the variation will be different. So for each of the variable, change in variable, there will be different change in the function. So that is captured in the form of a vector. So the first derivative of a multivariable function is a vector, because each variable gives a different slope to that function. That is, variation in each of the variable gives a different slope of that function, and that is captured by the gradient vector. So the gradient of fx bar at a particular point x star, so that means a specific value of x1, specific value of x2, and so on, is, so it is pronounced as grad of f, and symbolically it is written by the del symbol or grad symbol. So that is, since it is a vector, I'm just putting a bar on top of that. X bar star. So it is a vector. So the first term would be partial derivative of that function with respect to x1. So I would put here x1 star. Means that particular, whichever location you are calculating the derivative. So it is a specific to the x1 star, x2 star up to xn star, they are the coordinates of the point at which you are calculating the gradient. The gradient of the function will vary depending on which point you are choosing. The second one will be da by f by da by x2 star, and right up to the last point. So this is the definition of the gradient vector. So let's understand what does it geometrically mean for a function of two variables. So function of two variables are always easy to visualize. So if I consider a function of two variables, x1 and x2, and let's consider our function a to be that of a circle. So if we consider our function as x minus a square plus x1 minus a square plus y1 minus b square equal to 0 or equal to r square. So that is what our function we are considering. So this particular function, it has got two variables, x1 and x2. So the gradient vector of this function would be calculated by, means here f of x bar is x1 minus a square plus x2 minus b square. So this is the function. So r square is specific value if you give. So it is a set of circles with the center at a and b. If you calculate the gradient, you will find that geometrically the gradient vector is, so let's say this is our x star. So this is x1 star and this is x2 star. You will find that the gradient vector at this function is always normal to the tangent passing through that point. So if this is my x1 star, you'll find that the gradient vector is a vector which will be normal to the tangent at that point, and it will always point in a direction in which the function value increases. So this is the gradient of function. So for example, if our function is circle, which is easier to visualize, if you draw a tangent to that circle at that particular point, the gradient vector will be perpendicular to that tangent line, and it will always point. So this gradient vector always points towards direction of maximum increase in function. So that is the physical or geometric interpretation, so which is easier to visualize in case of two-dimensional functions. In higher dimensions, it will become more and more complicated to understand. So in 3 dimensions, it will be sphere. Means, for example, a function would be sphere. Then it would be tangent to that plane, tangent to that sphere, and the gradient vector will be normal to that particular plane, and so on. So in higher dimensions, it is difficult to visualize for us. Okay, so that is as far as gradient is concerned. The quantity which is equivalent to the second derivative, which we need for processing these multi-dimensional variables, it takes form in the form of a matrix. So it is no more a scalar. Like in univariate, the second derivative is a number. First derivative as well as second derivative is a number. In multivariate, the first derivative is a vector and the second derivative is a matrix. So it is n by n matrix, where n is dimension of your function. So that is known as Hessian matrix. So these concepts will require for our further understanding of optimization. So when you are dealing with a multivariate function, in order to find the optima, you need to calculate the gradient vector and the Hessian matrix in order to decide the sufficiency condition. So the gradient vector is required to define the necessary condition. So similar to univariate, where you have f dash is equal to 0, here you have the gradient vector must be a 0 vector, and something where we have f double dash x greater than 0 less than 0, you have something similar corresponding to the operations of the Hessian matrix. Okay, so Hessian matrix is obtained by differentiating the gradient vector once again. So this is differentiating the gradient vector. So the H is represented as H matrix, so which is having n by n, is a square matrix, also represented as del square f or grad square f. So if you remember the del of f, the first term, does anybody remember what is the first term? It is dabba f by dabba
X1.
x1. So each of the term is corresponding up to dabba f by dabba xn. So when you are calculating the Hessian matrix, the first term you will be further differentiating with respect to each of the variable once more. So the first row you will get dabba 2f by dabba x1 square. Then you have dabba 2f by dabba x1 dabba x2. So here you are differentiated with respect to x2. Next term would be dabba f by dabba x1 dabba x3. So on up to the last term, which is dabba 2f dabba x dabba xn. Second row, you will have dabba 2f by dabba x1. So here the second term is dabba f by dabba x2. So this term would get differentiated with each of the functions once again. So it is dabba 2f by dabba x2, x2 square. So on. Last will be dabba f by dabba x2 dabba xn, and so on. And last will be dabba 2f by dabba x1 dabba xn, up to last is dabba 2f by dabba xn square. So that is the way the Hessian matrix would be calculated. The utility of this matrix is in determining you know that there are certain properties of the matrix. So for scalars, you have positive numbers and negative numbers. So you must have studied in matrix algebra. There is some property of matrix which is positive, negative. Anybody remembers what are those? There is some property of matrices which have the term positive and negative in them. Anybody recollects?
So could you repeat the question once again?
In matrix algebra, you might have come across some property of matrix which has the term positive and negative into them. So anybody remembers that property of a matrix? When matrices are of different types, so there is one type which has name positive and negative into them. Okay, so corresponding to positive numbers in scalars, we have something which is known as positive definite matrix. Have you come across this term, positive definite matrix? Okay, I just want to know whether you have come across or no. You might not have come across, it need not be.
No, sir.
Okay. Okay, so we will understand what that positive definite means, and it is how it is related to the optimization problem. Okay, so that is just in mathematics we learn just terminology, means some matrix is positive definite, or there are certain other classes like positive semi-definite, positive negative, means negative definite, negative semi-definite. So there is a classification of matrices, but their physical meaning is we'll come to know when in this session we'll discuss how that property helps us to define the sufficiency condition. So something similar to f double dash x greater than 0, then we know that it's a minima. So in this case, we have some operation on this Hessian matrix, or the property of the Hessian matrix will determine whether it's a minima or maxima. So for that purpose, we need to calculate the Hessian matrix. So in order to deal with the multivariate functions, we should be able to calculate the gradient function as well as the Hessian matrix. So it's almost 1 hour. So I will just write down one problem, and I will give you 5 minutes to solve it. So you have to calculate the gradient and calculate the gradient and Hessian matrix for following functions. So the function is as given here. So it is fx bar is x1 cube plus x2 cube plus 2x1 square plus 3x2 square minus x1 x2 plus 2x1 plus 4x2. So some of you can take a break, and others can take a break and solve this problem. So I want del of f. So it is having function of two variables. So this will be 2 by 1 vector, and the Hessian matrix would be a 2 by 2 matrix. Okay, so it's 2:57. So 2 minutes past 3 is the breakout time. So you are free to do anything. Anybody got the answer of our gradient?
The first
Yeah,
row
first
is 3x1 square plus 4x1 minus x2 plus 2.
That's right. And
Then 3x2 square plus 6x2 minus x1 plus 4.
that's right. So I hope everybody is getting the same, those who have tried. Okay. So this is nothing but this is del f by da by f by da by x1, and this is by da by x2. Okay. Now this function, whatever you have got, so you have to differentiate first with x1 and then with x2. Then you will get the first row of this particular Hessian matrix. So what is the first term of Hessian matrix?
6x1 plus 4.
6x1 plus 4
Then minus 1.
minus 1.
Again minus 1.
Yeah.
And 6x2 plus 6.
6x2 plus 6. Yeah. So thanks, Prajwal. Yeah, that's right. So that is how these values can be calculated, and you want to determine at a particular specific point. So if we substitute the magnitude of x1 and x2, then you will get the value of the gradient vector and the value of Hessian matrix. So that is what you will obtain here. Okay, now having done this, before we go into application of this for the optimization problem, we have to yet to understand that property of matrix, which is equivalent to positiveness of a scalar. So in matrix also you have classification which goes like matrix. They are classified into types which are positive definite, positive semi-definite, negative definite, and negative semi-definite. And okay, for our purpose, we are only interested in this positive definite, which is equivalent to the second derivative greater than 0. So we are interested in this, but just for the sake of completeness, let me just write down. So your positive definite, negative definite, semi-definite, negative definite, and there is something called as an indefinite. So there are five, any matrix can be classified into one of these 5 types. And it has got, from the optimization point of view, or what we are talking about for our course purpose, the only property we want is whenever the Hessian matrix is positive definite, it is equivalent to f double dash x is positive. So that is where the function would be minimum. So that is what we are looking for. So we'll see the procedure how to determine this type of matrix. What is the procedure for determining the type of matrix? So these are known as types of matrices, and we are interested among them one particular type, that is positive definite. So we want to determine whether our Hessian matrix is positive definite or negative definite. If it is positive definite, our point of interest is minima. If it is negative definite, then our point of interest is maxima. So that is what we're interested in. So in order to do that, we have to know how to check this property of a matrix. So I will explain that procedure, and we'll do one quick calculation to do that. Okay, form or type of matrix. It is more technical terms is form of matrix. So these are known as form of matrix, what I just explained, 5 forms of matrix. So the one which is positive definite, it implies, if the matrix is positive definite, it implies that the value of the function which is given as x transpose, so matrix A is positive definite provided the quantity which I am writing here is greater than 0 for any x bar not equal to 0. So if you have matrix A, for example, the Hessian matrix, and you want to determine whether it's positive definite, you have to consider any arbitrary vector. So if it is n by n vector, so your matrix is n by n. So this is property of square matrices, which is so the positive definite, negative definite implies to square matrices only. So the x bar is any n by 1 vector. So transpose of that will be 1 by n. So if you take this particular product for any arbitrary value of x, which is non-zero. So if you take 0, obviously you will get 0. So any non-zero value of x bar, you calculate this particular product. If it is greater than 0, then this particular matrix is called as a positive definite. And similarly, there are definitions for the remaining terms. But here we will just focus on this because that will lead us to the minima point. Okay, now using this definition and taking some arbitrary values of x1, x2, one would be able to find out, but that would be very tedious procedure. So there are some simpler methods. There are 2-3 more methods which will determine the form of a matrix. So one which is relatively simple is based on calculation of eigenvalues of a matrix, and that is what we are going to use. So in this method, so checking the form of matrix. So as I said, there are 2-3 methods for doing this. So the one method which I am using is based on calculation of eigenvalues of a matrix. So you calculate the eigenvalues of matrix. I will explain how to calculate eigenvalues because I believe most of you would have forgotten by this time. Okay, have you done eigenvalue? Concept of eigenvalue is known to you? I believe so.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, so we need to calculate eigenvalues of matrix. If you don't remember now, that is okay. I will just show that. So you calculate the eigenvalue. So if it is an n by n matrix, then you will have lambda I. So lambda is the eigenvalue. So there will be n number of eigenvalues. So up to 1 to n. So once you calculate for this matrix all its eigenvalues, if all the eigenvalues they are greater than 0, that is strictly greater than 0. So for I equal to 1 to n, then this particular matrix is positive definite. And similarly, there are other conditions for, so if all eigenvalues are less than 0, strictly less than 0, then it is negative definite and so on. But again, as I said, we require for our purpose only positive definite form. So that is why I'm focusing on that. So in order to determine the form, you need to calculate the eigenvalues. And in order to calculate the eigenvalues, you have to write this matrix in the determinant form. So in order to calculate the eigenvalues, you need to write this equation in the determinant form. So to calculate eigenvalues, so whatever terms are there for the matrix, so I'm just writing a 3 by 3 matrix for simplicity. So all the diagonal terms you have to write minus lambda. D, E, F, G, H, I. So A minus lambda, E minus lambda, and I minus lambda. And you take this, you solve this, means you evaluate the determinant, you will get on the left hand side a polynomial in terms of lambda, nth power polynomial of lambda. You find the roots of, means you solve, you find the roots of that polynomial, and those are your eigenvalues. That is how the eigenvalues can be found out. So let's take one problem so that it illustrates this procedure. And if all eigenvalues are positive, then it is a positive definite matrix. So it should be strictly positive. 0 values are not allowed. If it is 0 value, then it is known as semi-definite matrix, which is not useful for our optimization purpose. Okay, so let's illustrate this with an example. So what is the form of, or rather, is the matrix positive definite. The matrix is -1, 1, 0, 1, -1, 0, 0, 0, -1. So in order to check whether this matrix is positive definite or no, we have to calculate its eigenvalues. So we have to form the determinant. So determinant, you have to just write -1. All diagonal terms you have to write minus lambda. So remaining terms remain as they are. 1 minus 1 minus lambda, 0, 0, 0, minus 1 minus lambda. Equal to 0. So we have to evaluate the determinant for this particular. So you have to evaluate this determinant. So we'll get -1 minus lambda into this particular determinant. So that is -1 minus lambda, 1 minus lambda, minus 0, minus of 1. So now we are talking about this into in the bracket 1 into -1 minus lambda minus 0 plus 0 equal to 0. So that will, if you simplify this particular thing, it can be factored as -1 minus lambda
So the inside bracket says -1 minus lambda the whole square. So actually the third term is -1 minus lambda. In the bracket I have written 1 minus lambda.
Just hold on. Yeah, I was just checking whether that is means that sign is really -1. That's right. Thanks. This is what you're saying, right? This sign should be minus.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thanks. So my notes are written wrongly, so I just copied from there. You're right. That's right. But nevertheless, the final answer is correct. Okay, so 2 plus lambda equal to 0. So this implies the 3 eigenvalues you get as -1, -2, and 0. So what is our conclusion? So is it a positive definite matrix? For
No.
being positive definite?
No, sir.
Yeah. So what is the reason, Karthik?
So the eigenvalues are negative. 2 eigenvalues are negative and 1 is 0.
Okay. So for being positive definite, what is the condition?
All of the values should be positive.
So all should be positive and none of them should be 0 or 0 or negative.
Yeah.
It. So this implies this is not positive definite. It's for the sake of completeness, this particular form is known as negative semi-definite. So whenever you have one of the eigenvalue as 0, then it becomes semi-definite. And based on the signs of the other two, if all of the remaining are negative, then it becomes negative, and all are positive, then it is positive. Okay, but that is not for the optimization class, that is not required.
Sir?
Yeah.
Sir, for this particular determinant, we could have directly said that is it won't be positive definite, because if we look at the A33 term, that is -1 minus lambda, we could take that factor common out from the determinant and would have told that 1 plus lambda into some value would have given 0. So one of the eigenvalues is negative, so the matrix is not positive determinant.
So you are saying 1 minus lambda is common through everything.
Yeah, either from R3 or C3.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that is a good observation. That's nice. Okay, that's right, Mukul.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so one would have done that also, but yeah, that is okay. I will accept that. Okay, but here the purpose was to illustrate the procedure, so that is what we are doing. So that is the way you determine form of the matrix, and final utility of this form is in determining whether your ACN matrix, if it is positive definite, then there is some sufficiency condition linked with that. So now we'll move to our main purpose for which we have developed these concepts. So using the gradient and Hessian, we will define now our necessary and sufficiency conditions for our multivariate problem. So let's move to the multivariate problem and their optimization. So similar to the Taylor series expansion for single variable problems, there is a Taylor series expansion for multivariate problems as well, multivariate functions as well. Okay, so in single variable problem, we had the variable h. So h is the small variation around the x value. So x plus h, x minus h. So in this case, you don't have a single variable. You have x1, x2, x3, x4, and so on. So that variation, instead of a single scalar, it will be a vector. So that is termed here as d bar. So in first single variable, we have x plus h equal to fx plus h into f dash x and so on. So this h term is replaced by a vector term here, because you can have variation in different directions, in x1 direction, x2 direction, and so on. So that is d bar. So instead of h, we have a vector d bar, and this d bar is defined as it's the difference between your point of interest, that is x bar star. So about this point, you want to know the variation, and this x bar is away from this point of interest by a vector which is arbitrary. So you can have, just like h can have infinite values, this d bar can have infinite values, infinite directions and infinite magnitudes. So, but only thing, its magnitude is small. So for this expansion to work, the magnitude has to be very small, and then this would work. And the Taylor series expansion would be given as f of x bar star plus d bar is given as f of x bar star. So that is similar to the term what we had there. Plus, instead of the term means this particular product, first product is getting replaced by del of f transpose. So transpose of the gradient vector multiplied by d bar. So I'll just put so this is magnitude. So this is 1 by 1. So this is 1 by 1. The gradient vector is n by 1. So transpose of that is 1 by n. And this d bar is n by 1. So n rows, 1 column. So n by 1. So product is again a scalar. Plus the next term. So that is plus we have h square by 2 factorial into f double dash x. So that is replaced here by 1 by 2 d bar transpose into ACN matrix multiplied by d bar, and plus the r, where r are the remainder terms. So if your d bar is sufficiently small, the remainder can be ignored. So that is what we usually do. So for the purpose of optimization, we are considering only up to the second term, that is after the main function. And this particular thing, again, we can check. So this d bar transpose is 1 by n, ACN matrix is n by n, and the D matrix is n by 1. So the ACN matrix is a square matrix, and another property which I forgot to mention, but you must have observed, is that it is always a symmetric square matrix. So you can check at its formulation to understand why it is symmetric. So you always have whether you differentiate a function first with x1 and then with x2, or first you differentiate with x2 and then with x1, the terms remain same. So you have the symmetry coming because of that. So this is a symmetric matrix. So that is just not related to this. I just came to my mind, so I just put it here. Okay, so we have something which is equivalent to h into f dash x, and we have another thing which is equivalent to the h square into f double dash x. So the logic what we applied in single dimension variables in order to determine whether the function is whether the point is minima or not. So we had discussed in the same fashion, we can discuss it here. So in order for this x bar star to be minimum, so for x bar star to be minimum, so first condition we must have is, so that is the necessary condition. So the Taylor series expansion ends here. So next we are starting the optimization condition based on this discussion. So the necessary condition should be, since this d vector is an arbitrary vector, so it can have any value, positive, negative, or anything. In order to make the function value to be minima, so that is unchanging, the gradient vector must be equal to 0. If it is not 0, then you may get a positive and negative variation in the function values. So since we don't want any variations for it to be minima, so necessary condition is that the gradient vector must be equal to a 0 vector. So that is the first condition that it must satisfy. And the second condition, that is the sufficiency condition. Assuming that R is negligible, is that at x bar star, the Hessian matrix, it must be positive definite. So if you remember the definition of positive definite, which we discussed earlier. So if a matrix is positive definite, then if it is pre-multiplied and post-multiplied by any arbitrary vectors, or the same vector, its transpose and the vector. So here the x bar transpose and x bar, they are replaced by d bar transpose and d bar. And our A matrix is H matrix. So this is the exact term which is there in our Taylor series expansion for multivariate function. So if the matrix is positive definite, then this term is positive. So that is what we get from here. So this particular term, if H matrix is positive definite, then this particular product will also be positive, and we have already said this is 0. So which means that in any direction you move around x bar star, the resultant value will always be higher. Since this is positive, the second term is positive, the function will always rise in any direction, and for small magnitude it will always rise in any direction. So that makes our point x bar star definitely a minima point. So that's why this is a sufficiency condition. Assuming our higher order terms, they are neglected in this particular calculation. Okay, so that is the so we have evolved from one-dimensional optimization problem to multi-dimensional optimization problem. So in multiple dimensional optimization problem, you have to satisfy two conditions. One is the gradient must be equal to 0, and second is the Hessian matrix must be positive definite. And we at this time we are equipped with methods by which we can calculate the gradient, and we can also calculate the form of the Hessian matrix. So let's illustrate this with a problem, unless somebody has some quick question. Okay, so let's proceed with the calculation. Find the local minima for function which is fx bar equal to x1 plus 4 into 10 to power 6 divided by x1 multiplied by x2 plus 250 x2. So we want to find the local minimum for this particular function. So we'll use the method. So this is a function with two variables. So we'll use the procedure which we just now discussed. So we'll satisfy the necessary condition and the sufficiency condition to determine the minima point. So the necessary condition for optimality is gradient of the function should be equal to 0. So if we calculate the gradient of this particular function, it will come as 1 minus 4 into 10 to power minus 6 x1 square x2. When you differentiate it with respect to x2, you will get minus 4 into 10 to power 6 by x1 x2 square plus 250. So this should be equal to 0. So we get two set of equations. So this gradient equal to 0 leads you to the simultaneous equation. In this case, for two-dimensional problem, there will be two simultaneous equations. So we have to solve these two equations in order to calculate the value of x1 and x2. So we have first equation is 1 minus 4 into 10 to power minus 6 x1 square x2 equal to 0. And the second one is minus 4 into 10 to power 6 by x1 x2 square plus 250 equal to 0. So this would imply that x1 square into x2 equal to 4 into 10 to power minus 6 and 250 x1 x2 square equal to 4 into 10 to power minus 6. So this implies, just by subtracting these two equations, you will get x1 square x2 minus 250 x1 x2 square equal to 0. So this implies x1 x2 x1 minus 250 x2 equal to 0. Now either at x1, so one of the possible solution is either x1 equal to 0 or x2 equal to 0. But by looking at the function at x1 equal to 0 and x1 equal x2 or x2 equal to 0, the function is singular. So that means that would not be a minima point. So that will exclude. So only condition which we have is that this condition. So x1 equal to 250 times x2. So by substituting that in this equation, we will get 250 square into x2 cube equal to 4 into 10 to power minus 6. Sorry, it's not minus 6, I think. Sorry, everywhere I'm writing minus 6, but it's not minus 6. Just correct that. Okay, so it's 4 into 10 to power 6. So this implies x2 equal to 4, and which also implies x1 equal to 1000. So x2 equal to 4 and x1 equal to 1000 is the point which satisfies the necessary condition. That means at this particular point, the gradient is 0. So in order to determine whether it's minima or maxima, we need to check the Hessian. So just calculate the Hessian matrix and tell me whether this is, tell me the value of Hessian matrix at this particular point. So the Hessian matrix is 8 into 10 to power 6, x1 cube, x2, x1 square, x2 square. So by substituting the values, you will get the function as 2 into 10 to power minus 3, 0.25, 0.25, 125. Okay, so this is the value of h at the point which is a candidate point for optimality. So at this point we have to check whether this particular matrix is positive definite. If it is a positive definite, then that point would be a minima point. So in order to do that, we have to calculate eigenvalues of this particular function. So I'll just I need to take one call, so just excuse me. In the meantime, one of you who is fast enough in calculation can tell me what are the eigenvalues. Just give me 2 minutes. Okay, sorry. So we have to now determine whether this matrix is positive. Means we have to calculate eigenvalues to determine its form. So determinant 2 into 10 to power minus 3 minus lambda. So this, I'm just skipping some of the steps. I'm just writing the final polynomial that I'm getting. So it is lambda square minus 125.002 plus 0.1875 equal to 0. So this will lead you to this particular polynomial, which will give us the eigenvalues as 1.5 into 10 to power minus 3 and 125.0005. So here we observe that both these eigenvalues are positive. So which implies that the Hessian matrix at x bar star, so where x bar star is our value at x1 is 1000 and x2 is 4, is positive definite, which implies that x bar star is minima. So the minimum, if you plot it graphically for this particular point, you will observe as follows. Our function is x1 plus so this is our objective function which we are trying to minimize. So this variation of this function is as shown here. So the point what we located is 1004 . So this particular objective function is minimum at this particular point what we identified. So this particular value, the fx star, if you substitute the values as 1004, you will get this minimum value as 3000. So that is the minimum value. And what I have drawn around it are the what is known as isocontours. So just to understand how your function is minimizing and validate that our results are correct, if you plot this, so this can be very can be done more efficiently using programming. So if you just write this program, there is a Python function which can give you this isocontour directly. So just to illustrate here, so the first one is 3050, the second one is 3100, the next one is 3600, and this is 4000. So each of these lines represent the value of function, which is, so this particular line is value where the function value is 3600, this is where it is 3100, and so on. And finally the minimum, or the, if you can visualize this as a three-dimensional surface, then the bottommost point is the one which is at 1004. So that is the minimum point that we have identified here. So this particular case illustrates the use of how to use for how to find the minima for the multidimensional function. And till now, the problem that we had discussed, it was dealing with problems without any constraints. So right now, what you have seen, the problem did not have any constraint. So we just have this particular function and we wanted to minimize it. So this is known as unconstrained optimization problem. Next, in the next session, we will look into what is known as optimization problems with equality constraints. So equality constraints are somewhat easier to handle than inequality constraints. And finally, we will have the most generalized optimization problem where we will look into optimization of problems with equality as well as inequality constraints. So for that purpose, we are going to use something what is known as Lagrange multiplier method. So that method allows you to convert constraint problem into an unconstrained problem, and then we can solve it. Okay, so I think, yeah.
Even this itself is a mathematically constrained problem. Like we can't use the values 0, comma 0, right?
In this, yeah, no, that is not a constraint. In the sense, the function is singular at that particular point, but there is no constraint on this problem. The constraint could be something like your x1 and x2 must be always lie on this particular line.
Okay,
So,
fine.
so if that is the case, so it is a equality constraint. So whatever is the equation of this line, so ax1 plus bx2 equal to c. So that is the equation of this line. So if you specify this, then this becomes your equality constraint. So your solution must lie on this particular line. So that becomes optimization problem with the equality constraint. So that is what we are going to see next. And lastly, we are going to see the most generalized form. So there we have inequality constraints. So there we will say that the optimum point must lie to the right of this line. So that is the more complex form. So we will see that both this equality and inequality constraints we will cover in the next class. Okay, so
Sir, is there a scene like that the curve formed by 3050, like all the values are within that curve only?
no, this curve, every point on this curve will give you function value of 3050. What is your question?
Yes, sir. So, like, will that curve act as a constraint if, like, all the values are given 3050?
No, that is the nature of your objective functions. You are just to visualize this objective function. I have drawn these curves just to verify, means visually verify that our minima point is always minima. So we see that it is the function indeed is moving from 4000 to 3600 to 3100. So these numbers are not important. Only we are seeing the trend that as you move towards this particular point in any direction, you will find that the function is always decreasing. So the
Okay.
minima must lie somewhere towards this particular point.
Hmm.
So that is
So
the,
yeah. So the minimum value of the function is 3000 and it can't be less than that.
yeah, it can't be less than that.
Okay.
Okay, so any other questions or doubt? Otherwise, we'll stop at this point.
So I had a doubt, like for finding whether it is a definite or not definite.
Yeah,
Uh, it's written any random vector is taken, like x bar
right,
or x.
right.
So computing eigenvalues won't be an easy task, right? If we see computationally.
Yes, as I said, there are more than eigenvalue method. Okay, what you are saying is correct. Eigenvalue computation is expensive.
So we could take any random simple matrix, like for instance there are n, for like there's a n squared matrix, so we can take n vector like 1000, something like that.
No, but you have to prove that for any such random vector, it should remain positive. So how many vectors you will take? Means if you have to go by this route, you have to consider some vectors for this.
Okay, okay, not only one single vector.
No, it is for any random vector, it should be positive. This product must become positive.
Okay, sir,
So you can
fine.
take that vector as in terms of variables. So you can take it as y1, y2, y3 up to yn. Then calculate this product in terms of, so you'll get some function in terms of y1, y2, yn. So if you can prove that that function can never be negative, then you can prove that this is positive definite.
Okay, okay, got it, sir,
That is
got it.
possible.
Fine, sir.
Okay, so the initial part means some of you are comfortable with mathematics and some of you may not be so comfortable, but this particular course, the initial part, it will appear more mathematically intensive, but it is not so throughout the course. So those who are not comfortable with mathematics need not worry. Okay, and anyway, we are not covering any derivation or other things in your evaluation or assessment. So we'll be looking applications. Whatever method or procedure we have developed, you should be able to apply this. And more importantly, so not for this method, but for other methods, you should be able to write computer code to run these algorithms. So most of these optimization methods, doing them manually is practically impossible. Means you can do 2-3 iterations, but usually you require hundreds of iterations. So that is manually not impossible, but that is torturous. So the computer code is the only way in modern times to solve these problems.
So,
Yeah, Mukul.
sir, in your definition for positive definite matrix, sir, first you've written transpose of X and then you've written X bar. Sir, are those like the basic X matrix is the same, or are those two different representatives?
They are same. So it is okay. I did not write X bar here. Okay. Yeah, they are same.
Yes, sir. Sir, and is there any particular reason for writing half on the left side?
Oh, that is part of the definition. I don't know
Okay.
why that half comes.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, means it need not be there, but that is how the definition comes. So there must be some reason for that. So some mathematics book can give you. Matrix algebra, matrix book can give you something.
Yes, sir.
I don't know for reason for that. Okay. Okay, the books which I'm referring, did I tell the name of the books? I don't think so. So there are 3 books which I'll be referring. I'm just opening the syllabus. Okay, so partly I'll be using SS Rao. So part of what I discussed now is taken from book of SS Rao, and also another book, Jasbir Arora, Introduction to Optimum Design. So these 2 books, the half of the course would be covered by combination of this. And for programming part for writing the algorithms. So there I'll be using this very nice book by Professor Deb about optimization in engineering design. So it gives a lot of algorithms, so which is what is practically important. So one part is theory, so you must know the theory part, which we are doing now. But when you come to implementation or when you are doing mini projects, so I'll be giving you some course project. So for that you need ability to do the coding. So there this book by Dave, and later on we are going to see many algorithms which are numerical methods to solve these optimization problems. So they are more better explained in this particular book. So I believe the soft copy of this should be available. SS Rao is definitely there. Jaspir Arora, I don't know. Dave also may be there. Okay, so one part which is remaining is I need to assess your preparation for writing Python programs. So most likely this Thursday tutorial session we can have on this Python coding, but that is an important skill which I want you as a students of optimization to get, because knowing these methods is one part, but the ability to apply them to real life engineering problem is also important. So these problems cannot be solved manually. So even though you know the method, you cannot solve them by hand. So you must have skill to write your own programs to solve your problems, optimization problems. So as a part of your mini project, I will make each of you will have to identify one problem in your from mechanical engineering, since all of you are mechanical engineering engineers, and you have to formulate the problem and solve using the techniques that we are learning in this course. So that will give you confidence that whatever we are learning, it works or it doesn't work. At least that much you should know what doesn't work. Okay, so that's all. Any other questions or queries? Okay.
So, when you showed the code for that graph, so like we are even expected to understand how to use the libraries like NumPy and all.
Yeah, just hold on. I'm getting a call. Which Prasad, you were saying something.
So when you were showing that code for that graphs,
Right.
I saw you using the libraries like NumPy and Matplotlib.
Right.
So you supposed to even understand those things, or you just showed us for representation purpose?
No, usually you don't have to understand those libraries in detail. So usually the way, like for plotting, you simply copy paste the code which is available on the internet. So that is what I don't want you to write it from scratch, although it helps, but you may not have time to do that in the running semester. If you have time and if you have interest, then it is desirable. But otherwise, just to get a plot, you can copy some ready-made code which is available and paste it in your code. So that is allowed. It is okay.
Okay, fine, sir, fine.
Yeah. Okay. So most of the time, much of the code which I write is taken from either my previous codes or some code which is available on the internet. So that saves a lot of time. Only thing, if you land up in some problem, then debugging somebody else's code becomes a headache.
Okay, sir, fine, sir.
Okay. Okay, so let's stop it for today.